Good day. Welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. Your host, Rylan Qualley, here once again for a special edition of the Whiskey and Barbell series. So, Whiskey and Barbell is always where me and AJ get together and we talk about fitness while having some whiskeys. And not only is this special because we have an additional special guest, Rich Girardin, but it's also awesome because we are in person for the very first time. And this is our first podcast I've done in person with anyone. So it's a lot of fun, a lot more intimate because you get to flow the conversation a lot more naturally. And Richard Rardon, being a special guest, is awesome. Now, he is a friend of ours and a whiskey drinker, but more importantly, he's an athletic therapist. So he has a lot of familiarity with exercise. But what's really helpful from his depiction is he's a lot closer to the general population than me and AJ are. And I love his feedback and his information that gives you more of really a perspective of your own. If you're not a trainer, you need to have the perspective of someone who doesn't have a profession in this realm. And so you get to hear that kind of feedback, and it's a lot more fun this way. We have a lot of great topics in this first edition. Now, this was a long conversation. We have 2 hours worth of conversation here. In the first half, we dive into more of the fat loss or maintaining fat loss section. We really pick up where me and AJ left off, and we talk about reverse dieting. We talk about where AJ understands about it, how he's worked with people in the past, and we talk about my mistakes, and I talk about how I've actually helped other people through it and how they were significantly more successful than I was. And so really good information for you to understand that after a fat loss phase, there are really important things that you can implement immediately within, and you can actually help sustain that physique better. And then that's the really next big topic I'd like to discuss on it is, what does it take to sustain low body fat percentage? And we talk about, being below 10% for a male or below 20 to 18% for a female. And what does a person actually have to include within their lifestyle in order to sustain that? Because it's not as simple as just you get there and you sustain it. There are sacrifices or there are systems that you need in place. And we discuss all of this within the conversation, and it's a lot of fun. Within the first one here, that's mainly what we talk about. And in the second part two, the next episode, we're talking more about muscle building. So this is a really good first one. I will apologize for the audio being okay. It was really challenging to try to link up all the mics and everything like that, but I still think that we get a solid conversation. You can hear everyone pretty well. And in future podcasts, I will do a better job of making sure the audio is that much more clear for everyone. But this is, as I said, in person, so you can also catch the video form of it on YouTube, and it does make it that much more fun and intimate for you to enjoy. So without further ado, let's dive into the very first in-person Strong Ambition podcast, Whiskey and Barbells. Well, guys, welcome to the Whiskey and Barbells. This is our third edition, first in person. So cheers. Thanks for joining. Mm-hmm. So we'll try to squeeze in at least an hour. We're going to see how long that camera lasts. Hopefully a bit more. But I do. We're going to talk a little bit about training nutrition, but I do want to keep Rich in the loop on some of this. But I did have a bit of an interesting story. And I mean, anytime you want to chime in, Rich, even though bodybuilding isn't much your thing, but I still like to always reference this stuff for general public still, right?
For the record, too, Rich had his CSCS before I did.
There you go. There you go. Certified Strength and Conditioning Coach. Probably even before me. When did you get yours?
Yeah, man. That would have been like 2009 or 2010.
Yeah, definitely before me. Yeah,
I think both of us.
I think so, because I think I got mine. Maybe it was around the same time, but it was, it was a few years after I was in university.
Knowledgeable.
Oh yeah. But I would argue for depending on what it is, right?
Yeah. I was doing more for therapy, right?
Yeah. But it goes to show you how important that certification is for knowledge,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
Yeah. But so my question was actually going to be where we left off last time, was talking about reverse dieting. What do you know about it? How do you recommend people do it? Because I have now experienced it in the what I did well, what I didn't do well about it.
Right.
But what would be like an overarching idea for people to appreciate it, whether it's bodybuilding or just general public? Because I find reverse dieting is one of the most important topics that people don't understand. I still don't understand exactly how to get people to do it, because there's a lot of psychology that goes into it. So.
Yeah. So a huge part is at the very basics of it, foundationally, is you would, again, work your math and find your best estimate of, okay, like what kind of deficit do we think that you're in, and what kind of calorie intake do we think would be a maintenance level for you, and then we kind of reverse engineer how to get there. So whether it's adding in, I'm trying to think. So from what I've done in the past, and I've helped people go in the past, and reverse diet, this is not going to be the same for everyone, but I think on average we added back in about 200 calories per week.
Yeah.
We increased like the total caloric intake for them. And obviously that's coming from your fats and your carbs, because your proteins, we are still, even at maintenance or at any phase that they're in. Normally when I'm working with people, we're always aiming to be at least a gram of protein per pound of body weight.
Mm-hmm.
So the protein never changed at all, but it would be increasing the carbs and fats going back up. And that's usually a preference thing to whatever people seem to like the most or feel gives them the most energy. But obviously a good portion of that is going to be adding carbs back in when you're coming back off of a show.
Right. The 200 calories made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you had a little notion for me when you had said, whatever your last day prior to your show, that would kind of be where you're at. And it made me uncomfortable,
Right.
which was kind of a downside. It was a massive downside because I got so oriented on I had to go slower. I just thought I had to go slower. If my last, calorie deficit was around 1,400, I was adding 200 to 300 or 400 from there. So I actually was starting around 1,800 calories,
Right.
and I was used to it. So it was fine for a little bit, but then guess what happens the next weekend when you're not being compliant to the diet? You get every week you get farther from the show, you get less compliant, right? And, with my experience with people, it's I just didn't realize how much you could just feed your level of activity.
Right.
So there was a couple clients, but especially one recently that was really fascinating, where we had to push him really hard to lose weight for his initial fight. And so he had to get down to 165. We barely made the weight. And
Where did he start at?
He started at 190, 193. We got him down.
How much time did you have?
10 weeks.
Oh,
And
wow.
and but water weight too, right?
Yeah.
So we made the weight.
Yeah.
And cardio was going to sacrifice. So I'm getting you to the weight as healthy as I can,
Right.
because you're not going to feel super conditioned.
perform.
And he had to go against someone who was normally at that weight, who was a hell of a conditioned athlete for that weight.
Right.
So he was he was going in against the wall there.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets that, and then he says, "I actually want to push farther." I'm like, because his coaches said you'd be good at 156. And so remember, 156 is you have 3 to 4 pounds of water at least. I always add 3 to 4 pounds of a water weight that a person can lose very easily.
Yeah.
So we push him a little farther, and then he gets within that range, and then he doesn't get the predicted fight date. And we actually pushed him hard because he was having worse relationship with food, and he was starting to binge here and there, but we got him there. And we pushed him really hard to the point where he was doing 1,700 calories, doing cardio in the morning and boxing. Now, this was the incredible thing where they said, okay, we're actually going to get you to try to go up a weight class in about 3 weeks here to 165. Okay, we get to eat. So we put it up 200 calories every couple of weeks. We got him up to 2,700 calories.
Mm-hmm.
He was not gaining weight. He was losing weight. And then even the week out, I was hey, 3,000, which is the guy was 158,
Right.
3,000 calories a day. And so what I learned from that experience with him versus myself was you're doing so much. You actually just keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
And then you just feed the metabolism. The hard part, I think, for people is keep doing what you're doing, right? Cardio, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And also
especially coming out of a bodybuilding show, because a lot of people you had a slightly different approach, but a lot of people are super cardio heavy. So that's the first thing they want to gas and get rid of is doing, I don't want to do double cardio a day. I don't want to,
Yeah.
You had a different thing because you had the step approach and you were just more active in your day-to-day life. And you're oh, I'm just going to walk to the grocery store instead of take my car. And
Yeah, well, I mean, not as severe. I was still doing cardio at the end, right?
Yeah.
And I kept it in.
You were, yeah.
I kept it in. I think if we're talking bodybuilding orientation, the hardest part is to know what is the maintenance that you just bump up to.
Right.
And Brett actually gave me a good number, and I was so scared of it.
Right.
He's yeah, go 2,400 calories. I put you around there. And I'm That's scary.
Yeah.
And I also didn't realize what I was doing to myself was allowing the yo-yo diet, because it's just the idea of like, well, if I have 1,800 calories for a few days throughout the week, then I have 3,000 on the weekend, balances out. That is a terrible notion. And I finally realized it, because it's like, if you want to build muscle, you only need to be an anabolic stimulus of about 200 to 300 calories. Some people 500,
Right.
which means like anything past that is just a bad idea. So when they say, oh yeah, balance out your calories throughout the week, I'm like, yeah, to a degree, right? So in any case, when it comes to like what I was doing there is like, I would see this kind of fluctuation. It wasn't too bad, but it led to more emotional eating issues, realistically, because like then you'd be on your diet again, which was good because it was way better than last time. When I was in the States, it took me 12 days and I lost it, and smoking weed, binge eating, all that stuff, right? But the weight stayed off longer, but I still found like I was just so afraid of feeding myself.
Right.
And I think one of the best lessons I hope to actually kind of portray to people is when you do a fat loss cycle, every 3 to 4 months, you should be doing a maintenance phase of like take off the gas pedal of the deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more people need to, and I've said this for a long time, and even to myself, need to take time eating maintenance calories, because it's amazing what your body can just recover from, even from that level. You don't need to be in a surplus, and it can do a lot of good for you.
Right.
Right. And like when it comes to like what that really does is you're rebuilding your muscle tissue better, right? If you do it at the appropriate time, you could have a little bit of a recomposition at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You could be building muscle and losing body fat a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Because your body's just so not used to having that many calories, right?
Yeah.
You just like a big part of your metabolism that is the genetic component that we're always curious, fast metabolism, slow metabolism, is the NEAT. But it's the NEAT of like the steadying, like some people vibrate when they move. Yeah. My brother, as you guys know, is a marathon runner, goes all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was tracking and doing all this shit throughout the whole summer. Yeah. That guy doesn't do a thing.
Yeah.
My body fat got way lower than his, and it flew by him.
Yeah.
Tracking the whole way. He's 100% intuitive, right? So what makes his metabolism unique is that he actually fidgets a lot.
Yeah.
It's like that little thing actually can just on average make such a difference, plus the intuition around food.
So there's a big study about that. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah. Like I forget what it was, but it's a ridiculous amount of calories you can actually burn if you're just fidgeting like throughout the entire day.
Well, I don't love some of the things that Huberman talks about, but it was all.
It's a good thing to do.
No, no. So like
pumping 24/7.
Well, but it was an interesting. It was actually it was a calf bump. Yeah. Head pop, it'll be good. Just always listen to techno music, right? What is love? So when Huberman had this fat loss podcast one day, and I was like super interested in it. But guess what? He never talked about diet and exercise once. Right. He talks about the shiver that comes from getting out of a shower, doing cold ice therapy. Yeah. And then he talked about like all these things were like interesting, but not practical. But the one that I still thought was interesting is just as a lesson, because it's not something I think you can install in yourself mentally and genetically. But when they did a study and people would just do their calf, they just bounce their calf. I said, a decent amount of calories throughout the day. Right. And it's like, I'm not going to tell my clients that you got to bounce your calf all day. Right. But that is something to appreciate, that's a difference in metabolism that you can't control. The one thing that you can control is, again, I'll just talk about that refeeding the metabolism, which I don't like to give this idea of metabolism like it being such a magical thing, but it's just feeding your body so it wants to do a bit more at rest, right? Mm-hmm. And I even noticed this recently where like, because I always walk downtown to P&H to do those workouts, and it's about a 30-minute walk, right? So that walk was like, routine when I was still dieting and stuff. And it would take me just over a half hour, around a half hour. And I flew through it this last week. I'm like, clearly I'm eating more because I'm not even trying to get there. I'm just wanting to move faster, right? Yeah. So I just think that's an important concept. Have you coached a few people through reverse dieting? Like I know with
just like I don't know how many I would say, but yeah. Like people coming out of competing, obviously. Myself coming out of competing, and then other people that were just some clients that we had at the gym through Focus that were just in a longer duration of like trying to get their body fat down. Mm-hmm. Change body composition, and then bring them out of deficit, obviously, for a while. Yeah.
Now, this is something we've talked about before, but like the idea, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing that I have noticed the most about nutrition is that it's good to like understand like the base premises of how it works and everything like that. And then when it comes to applying it to each person, I find it's completely individual to the person.
Very fair.
And it's like, just because this worked for this person doesn't mean works. Just because this is possible for this person, it doesn't, you know what I mean? So I have found that like, it's good to have like the knowledge, because then you have like a good starting point to like kick off from. You can make a good educated guess on where to start from. And then from there, it's like, who knows what's going to happen?
Right. What it doesn't make it easier for the person just because, you know, the numbers are there. It's like saying it does compare to budgeting a lot, right? When you talk about budgeting calories and all that stuff. Yeah. So we can use those analogously very well. It's like, yeah, you want to save more than you spend. Life's fucking complicated with the expenses that you have in your life. Yeah. Right. And how people, you emotionally spend money, just like you emotionally eat, or you don't want to do a workout and all those things. So the one question I was going to have is, one of the things that I think I even am gradually trying to humble myself on, but I haven't let go of, is the idea of sustainability in a lean physique. Yeah. What is realistic for people to understand or comprehend? Like, I am gradually becoming more comfortable with a certain body fat percentage because I just hold myself to a higher standard, or try to hold myself to a higher standard for social media and just for my clients looking at me. Right. But I still even just wonder, like, obviously you see people who talk about genetics. Yeah. Like, but what is realistic from your approach, from your perspective, for people to expect, like for men, for body fat percentage, like, and again, individualization for sure. But is below 10% for men, or below, whether it's 18 or 20% for women? Yeah. Is it realistic? Is it unrealistic? Like, what is it that you would, someone comes to you like that, like, hey, I want to be below 10% body fat. Yeah. Like, what kind of recommendations or what kind of advice do you have for someone like that? Yeah.
So I think obviously, like being under 10% body fat is completely realistic for people to operate that way throughout the year. You see it a lot in our athletes. I would say that the majority of them are under 10% all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the standard that we've hit for them. And we obviously, they're also athletes, so their lifestyle and activity might be different than like the average person. They're just an example of that it is possible, right? To exist in that. Right. So I don't question the existence. So two things that you just actually mentioned that I think are really important. You just said are athletes. Mm-hmm. So you are talking about people who it's their job to move. And this is something that like I really appreciated. Some of them are amateur athletes too, though, right? They're not all professionals. Okay. Right? So the second point I was going to say genetics, but the primary thing is just like, you have to be really active, right? Yeah. I think like active. If you can't have a standard of activity, it's going to be near impossible. The longer you've been in it too, the easier it is to stay there. I think I've found, like, people that are physically active, people that eat pretty well, people that whatever, allow themselves more flexibility in their diet, the more consistent they are over time, right? So someone that's been pretty dialed in for 5 years can have more flexibility within their diet without seeing some sort of dramatic effect than someone that's only been dialed in for 6 months.
But that's just routine, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And like once you get in a habit, like I guess that's perfect word, is you're just in the habit of it, and that's just now just normal for you. Just consistency over time, right? Like that structure and that consistency actually creates freedom for yourself to be able to, like, so, you know, if someone's like, oh, I'm eating this way and this way, whatever, and they, you know, and then they've been in it for like a month, and then they blow it out one weekend. And then they look at someone that's been doing it for like the last 10 years of their life, and they're like, well, this guy goes whatever on the weekends too, and I feel like he doesn't even notice it. Why do I notice it so much? And so, hey, he's been doing it for 10 years. You've been doing it for like 10 weeks. It's not even, there's a consistency quality there that our consistency
factor there that over time that like allows that person to have more flexibility and do things like that and not see such a dramatic change to their physique, right?
The Rich Gerard method, just blow it out every 8 weeks.
Well, so like the Rich Gerard method is actually just like it's a classic average person. Like, I mean, I think I even do it myself.
Yeah.
But what I actually think is interesting that you pointed to isn't just the fact that people have more flexibility, it's that they forgive themselves and they go back to their structure with comfort. And what you're talking to me about, this is where I am so much more fascinated with the whole realm of nutrition and metabolism.
Yeah.
I think we get to a point where we're mainly just talking about psychology. When we're talking about psychological, like I think the one factor I do want to still give credit to the athleticism and the standard of activity that it needs to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I say that is because if you're not really active, and that's why I am like, I don't want to say obsessed, but I very value step counts.
Right.
Like I very value that in the world of people being so sedentary.
Right.
And so when you're looking at athletes, like it's not always a fair comparison to someone who, what if they work not even 9 to 5, they work like 8 to 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're in a desk all day in a high stress job.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, I want to be in great shape. And then I want to stay in great shape. It's like, okay, like, are we going to walk and talk on when you're doing your webcam, right?
Right.
Like there's people who are metabolic, I call them metabolic prisons, because I have had clients like this where they're barely eating any calories, but they're barely burning anything, but they're stressed to the nines, right? So the one thing I think is super important for sustainability is a sustainable level of activity. Yeah. And then from there, I think we're talking about what is your relationship with your food and your food habits. And like that one day, or like you talk about, oh, this guy can do that. And then you get in the blame game and you just fall off the rails.
So great point though you made about the psychology, and that's exactly it. So to add on to what I was saying before is the person that's been in it for a long time, that's had consistency over time, they understand that it's never over. That's a powerful thing to understand. The person that hasn't been in it long is still, a lot of them are still under the impression that at some point that this is just going to be over. Mm-hmm. Like for them, the whole, they have like a goal of, oh, when I get to this body weight, when I get to this level of body fat percentage, when I get to this level of fitness, when I move this much or whatever, then it's just over. Like I've achieved it, I'm done, And the thing is that it's never over. And for the people that haven't come to fall in love with that process, it's very overwhelming for them. Just to be like, well, what do you mean? Like I'm struggling so bad in this right now to try to stay on track and whatever. That seems so daunting and overwhelming that it's never over, right? The person that's been consistent for a long time and that's showed that commitment to it, and not only have they afforded themselves more flexibility, but they've also come to the realization that it's a positive thing, that it's never over. Because if it ever ended, then you would lose all the benefits that became associated with it, right? So there's plenty of benefits that come with being associated, of being committed to a plan, having structure within your day through in a workout or how much you're going to move. There's so much positive benefits to just moving, physical activity. You talked about step counts. Tons of positive benefits. Some that takes 12,000 steps a day to some that only takes 1,000. You know what I mean? We're talking about physically, emotionally, mentally, all these things. So when you're in the long-term process, or in the long term, when you fall in love with the process and you realize that I don't want this to ever be over. I don't want to ever feel like I'm done, because then I lose this well that I can go to and get all these great benefits to my life. All of a sudden that resource is taken away from me if it's done. Right. We don't want it to ever be done. We always want to know that we're in it and it's just going to keep on going forever, for as long as we're around, and that we can keep going back to it. There's always an opportunity to get better. There's always that resource to draw from and get more from and stuff, right? So I think that's a huge psychological difference. So you're talking about the difference in psychology of people, the people that love the process and the people that just want to get to the destination, two totally different things.
Major thing that people who haven't really done it for a long time, or haven't even tried it, or haven't even attempted, they see it as just like a temporary thing. And I think a lot of people make that mistake. But the other major thing I look at is just even like you say, it's this character trait of like, this journey doesn't have to suck.
Yeah.
It's what empowers you in the process, right? Now, with that being said, I just want to nail on that step count point, because I actually think it's so cool. And this is how I feel about it. And it's just how I've been feeling about it. I've seen, you see social media and people try to rail against something, right?
Tell us your feelings.
That's what we're here for, boys. This is my therapy. Love it. I love the support.
Your feelings.
So I had someone comment on something I commented on. I can't remember what it was, but maybe she just made a post about like how step counts was just, some company trying to sell something at some point. And I just kind of like looked at it and I'm like, okay, there's a mortality rate curve with 8,000 steps is kind of where it limits, and 10,000s where it plateaus. Right. So they didn't make that shit up. Right. It's not like the 220 minus your age, which is literally a made up thing, ballpark thing. Like there are things that are made up, but this is a mortality rate thing. But let's also just look at people are super, if we're going to use the word metabolically, like I just say super inactive. We don't even have to use the word metabolism, but I call that metabolically unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And if you can't get 10,000 steps in a day, like you can't blame your metabolism. You have to blame their inactivity, right?
No, I thought their metabolism was just broken.
The classic broken metabolism, right? or no, actually, this is like the common thing. It's like, oh, I'm old and I have a bad metabolism, and it's like an age thing. It's like, right?
Metabolism broken. It needs to be fixed. I have hormone imbalance. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, like just so much like stuff that I'm just like, dude.
Well, I love
try moving more first, and then try to assess where you're at.
Well, the hormonal one, I think, is I just love the simple argument is like, ask bodybuilders how their hormones are. Like you can lose weight with shitty hormones. Mm-hmm. It's just hard. But my other major thing about what you had said with the step count that I really actually like, I'm not asking people to do cardio. I'm asking you to find a reason to be a part of life physically. Yeah. And what I actually tell people is I know there's an inaccuracy with physical steps on a wrist-worn watch. Right. But I say, if you wear a wrist-worn watch, when you go to clean your house, you get more credit. Yeah. When you go to do things like wash your dishes, you get more credit. Yeah. And when I tell you, I say park farther from a grocery store and go grocery shopping from foot. I used to always love the click and collect and pick up. I never do it now because I look at that as robbing me of my activity, and I don't feel bad about that. Like, there's certain obsessions that I think can be really like crippling for people. When people get obsessed with calories, it's like, 10 calories over, like, no, ballpark it. It's like have a 10 to 20% error rate. Right. Same thing with steps, but there's also a 10 to 20% responsibility rate. Yeah. Like I have an 8K step day. I'm not that I have a 6K step day. I'm not that worried, but I'm excited to know when I'm active. Right. And the best part is when you say those 12K steps, they happen. When you actually look at it, like, that was effortless. Right. I was living my life, and how much more present you are in your life. I'm not telling people to go do cardio. I'm telling people to be a part of life actively. Go for a walk with your dog, your loved ones, anyone. And I wanted to reiterate that because you talk about the psychology of movement or just psychology of the whole process. Yeah. I haven't regretted getting into step counting since I've been obsessed with it,
Yeah. The psychology, the mental health benefits, right? One of the best things you can do to help reduce your stress and anxiety is go take a walk outside. That's literally it. Like people are always looking for complicated answers and stuff. It's like go outside into the outdoor environment, into nature, and go for a walk. It's like that's one of the best things you can do, right? It's so easily accessible to you, but sometimes people don't like that, like simple of answers, right? But it's like just do that, and then imagine now if you do that, not only are you more active, so obviously there's the physical benefit of the more steps, but there's also the mental and emotional benefit from those rewards that we reap from being out in nature and being physically active. So think about too how much better mentally you feel and the more positive outlook you're going to have with your stress and anxiety reduced. And that when you go to like tackle the other stuff, like if you think your eating plan's kind of hard or your workout plan's hard or whatever, and now you're like coming from a better place mentally, it's like just easier to overcome those challenges. Like there's obviously, everything's just interconnected within the physical, mental, and emotional kind of realm. So these things that we're talking about,
about being more active in your step count, I'm a huge supporter of it too. I like it. However people want to measure it, I don't care. If you want to count steps, you don't want to count, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
The point is that you're more physically active, and like it's not just about you then burning more calories.
Yeah.
You took more steps. Like it puts you in a better place over all those realms of like physical, mental, emotional, and so you also feel better and better you feel, the more positive you are, the more you could, like, those things don't sound like such big challenges now than to like stay eating, making better food choices and stuff. Not so overwhelming when you mentally feel like you're in a better spot, right?
The mental health benefit you mentioned is so big, and it was one of my biggest discoveries during the prep. Was like, when I was doing that and I was doing my morning walks, I'd do a 45-minute walk, I would plan my day. I would plan my work, and I always came back so ready and excited for work. And I called it my morning drive to work, because people go to morning drive, they might play radio, podcast, whatever. But I was actually like, I would treat it like that. Like, everyone travels to work a lot of time. I can work from home, but I would do that. I would get to, I'd just be so excited for work. Yeah. And I would be, like you had talked about it, like I'd take these thoughts into a problem-solving mode. And it was so effective. And I remember actually hearing about research that when you actually want to have a more creative mindset, they've compared people on a treadmill and outside in nature, both people apparently score better for creativity, but being outside in nature actually is more impactful, which is, isn't that just super fascinating? We know we feel something. Yeah. We know it does something to us. And it's like you had mentioned, it sounds so boring. It sounds so like mundane, and we're not telling you to do cardio. And I think that's what I love about it, is like, I've discovered a way that we don't have to do cardio and hate to be fit. You know what I mean? Just go for a good paced walk. Yeah. I am a huge advocate for people. It's like when they tell me they're going for jogs to lose body fat, I'm like, please stop. If you could just lift weights and go for walks and occasionally sprint, you're going to do 90% of what you need in life. Right. The other major thing that I personally look at. Oh, keep going off that. Keep going.
Yeah. I will say that one thing so obviously there's ideals in every scenario, but I've also found over the years of being a thing that if also like someone likes doing something, I usually try to just be like, cool, man, that's your thing.
You got to do your thing.
Like you like going for runs, even though like maybe some research will support that this could be much more effective and you don't have to do it, but you like doing it and that's your thing. I'm like, then like, just do it.
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's what you're going to do. I'm not going to, I'll work with you around stuff that you enjoy doing. Knowing that you're going to do it consistently and you're going to enjoy it and have some level of enjoyment, instead of me like taking something away from you that you maybe really like, right? And being like, nope, you got to do this instead. And they're like, oh, I really like my jogs.
For sure.
And I'm like, no, don't jog. Like, it could be far more effective this way. And then, you know what I mean?
No, well, that's actually where I ask people first. I ask them, do you enjoy jogging? So when you say that, like 100%, I support people who jog. Please do it. If you like, I would never tell my brother not to jog because he enjoys it. Right. He's doing more in strength training. I'm like, fuck it. You're going after something you love.
Kaylin, stop jogging.
Stop running away from your life's problems. But like, no matter what, do what you love. And if someone's playing hockey, someone's doing, I don't care if it's, pickleball, like do what you love. Yeah. But when someone says, and I just ask them like, oh, so you're jogging to lose body fat, do you enjoy it? And they're like, no. It's like, what if I told you you had to, do boxing or hockey? It's like, but you don't know how to skate. It's like, it makes no sense to do things you don't enjoy. Right. The only thing I think you should find a reason to enjoy is moving. Right. Is moving in your life. The only thing, so like, if it's going for a walk, I think walking is a practical tool that everyone should be able to find an element of it in their life to some degree. And the other thing I do kind of think that helps with the step count, unless you know someone's super active, I do look at someone under 6K steps as being metabolically unhealthy. Right. I even worry about your stress. I worry about you being seated and crunched in on a desk, because it's probably what you're doing. And then you tell me the only way that we could in some way create a balance is if we can get some aerobic training, and we would have to do it in the gym efficiently. But like, if you have this, what I call metabolic prisons, and people are just at their desks all day and they cannot find a way, because like walking is even just upright. It's an upright stance. It'll actually get rid of that issue from sitting at your desk all day to a degree, right?
Yeah.
So when I look at that, coming back to the sustainability of any sort of physique that you want to have, like if you don't have the ability to sustain a decent output, like that's the only way you're going to do that is to eat like your calorie deficit. Let's say just for an average person, 2,000 calories is the maintenance. They have a 1,500 calorie. They're probably only going to be able to eat like 200, 300 more calories.
Yeah.
And that's their maintenance now.
Right.
Right. So it's like, yeah, you can sustain it maybe, but you are not metabolically healthy. And that's what I call metabolically unhealthy. If you're below that step count point, you just don't have enough activity. So I don't see someone sustaining something.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the other reason I'm big on step count.
And bring Richie Rich into this. Something important that interesting that you said.
Please.
Something that he shared with me a while ago that I found very interesting. Just because you had kind of briefly touched on the potential like postural effects there of like sitting all day, and then how you're standing now, you're a more upright position. And then Rich was actually sharing with me just a little while back ago in the gym on information on like postural positioning and like if it was important, if it wasn't important, if like people, if it actually led to an increased risk of injury or not injury and stuff like that. But I don't know, I'll let him explain it because I thought it was.
I want to hear that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I'd like to remember what I told you. I think I know what you're talking about. I was like, what are you talking about? You're talking about, I was talking about like rows and stuff. Like if you're like overextended in a bad position, like you're gonna be in a bad position at one point or another in life.
Yeah,
like
no, like you were telling me more about like your day-to-day postural position and how you're talking about like the whole forward head tilt and stuff like that. And you were saying like they were finding that like we made a big deal about it lately, like a lot on like certain positioning or whatever. But what they had found like through some of the more recent research that like people that like maybe from their, I don't know, that maybe had like more of a forward head posture, this and that, like that it didn't really affect people as negatively as we thought it was.
Might not actually.
No, that was you, man.
No.
I swear to God, you told me this.
It might have been, but I honestly can't remember.
Well, what would be your opinion of it?
Podcast now.
What would be your opinion of it?
I mean, it's not live. We can cut this, right?
No, I'm keeping this. I'm keeping this in. Rich is supposed to be the athletic therapist advisory here, so he's got to step up here.
Get my 2 cents in, eh?
I swear to God, you.
What's your perception? Even we can just talk about like sedentary lives and sitting at a desk, and like, do you believe that it has a substantial impact on people who walk more?
Yeah, like, I mean, I was kind of listening to when you're talking about it. I mean, the reality is, like, your body always wants to go into the least amount of effort possible, right? So, like, if you're sitting at a desk and you're hunched over, you're going to get...
Okay, this is what you were telling me.
Okay. All right. I just didn't know how you're explaining it. Yeah. Like, if you're sitting at a desk, right, you're going to be rounded, right, in that position, which is your bad position, which... Yeah, I mean, it's not your most optimal position, but it's because your body wants to do the least amount of work possible. So it's those muscles, those pec muscles are going to really tighten up. Yeah, exactly. And all that. So, I mean, it's not ideally what you want, but one of the things I was talking to you in the gym was, like, for example, I've seen like bad posture, like for positioning for lifting weights, but the reality is, like, for example, like in a row, if you're overextended at some point in life, you're going to need to be in that position. So I don't think it's necessarily bad to be in those positions at time. But in terms of like your neck and all that kind of stuff, like if it's causing you pain, then yeah, it's an issue and you have to address it.
But
yeah, and I actually heard a really interesting depiction on bad posture is more of a perception than we know what really good posture is, right? There's obviously far end extremes of either, but I know like we used to work with someone who had really good posture, and he made me very uncomfortable when you'd have really good posture. And so it's just like always good posture. And I'm just like, I feel uncomfortable because you're always in the upright posture. And then I realized actually more people don't have that posture. And so I heard a guy talk. Well, I heard a guy talk about it on a podcast. And he's like, actually, there's probably a little bit of a history to deal with more societal norms perceiving good posture as being people in like, the Britain times of just more high society people, upright, chin tuck. And it was actually more of a societal norm or expectation. So, high society people had quote unquote good posture, but it's not even normal. It was just this expectation.
Right.
And if you look at, I hate to always go to this, but it is a good way to just look at tribal people just living. This is perfect posture. They're on their feet all the time. They're moving around. They're just being active. They don't have perfect posture, right? Now they have different posture than people sitting at a desk. I'm not going to argue that.
Yeah, I was gonna say different times now, right? Like, I mean, everyone has rounded shoulders because think about like all day you're on a phone, you're on a computer, you're driving, right? You're in that position, right? As opposed to 100 years back, you probably weren't always in that position. But yeah, what's perfect? I don't know.
Well, that's the perception of it is like we have this idea of good posture and bad posture, and I just think it's interesting that we don't have to conceive perfect posture, but I do think it's important. And it was actually Nate Rubin who had pointed out. Gravity is always on you. Like that was actually a really humbling thing. Is like, actually, gravity is always pushing you down. So that is the problem with the desk. And even at the desk, people will have low back issues and all that stuff. And my lazy man or fix for the low back issue from not being rounded at the desk is I actually always put my feet up and I always recline back. And like if I'm typing or if I'm at my desk, like most of the time I'm reclined, so no low back stress. But neck stress because I'm always pushing my neck and I'm tilting my neck.
Your feet reclined.
Always have my feet up and my chair's back and reclined.
And then the keyboard's just like on
my lap. Yeah. So it always feels kind of relaxing on my back and on my legs. Yeah. I do feel like I get neck issues. There could be a theoretical issue with having a laptop around your testicles. I've heard that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, dude, I feel that. So, as you know, I've had multiple hernia surgeries. Mm-hmm. I got the mesh in there. I also had a testicular torsion. So I've had ball surgery, not surgery on both. So when I have my laptop on my lap, I can feel like this uncomfortable, like radiating sensation.
Really?
Like through where like I would have had like my hernia, they're inguinal hernias.
Yeah.
So through there and through the, I don't know, on your podcast, you want me to say testicles?
Say whatever, man. There's no filter here.
But I can feel this radiating type of heat, pain, and uncomfortable feeling or whatever. And I can't actually have my laptop right on my lap like that. I can't because I feel it. It's very strange.
Laptop
right?
or just a keyboard?
Laptop. Yeah. When the actual computer.
Yeah, the computer is giving you radiation, Wi-Fi, with all that stuff.
And I just had the keyboard. I'm sure.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
But when I have the laptop like on my lap, it's like too close.
And I'm putting in hours there. Like I
actually feel it. Like it's weird.
Well, I've heard.
You're the perfect case study, man. We'll find out in 10 years.
I don't like that. My lack of kids. I don't like that. Andrew Huberman actually is one who pointed out that there is research with just subtle radiation between that and phones. Yeah. That if it's always within that proximity for a long period of time, and it doesn't give me a low back pain, but there might be testicle pain. So there is that issue. But I mean, coming back to the metabolism talk a little bit.
I'm just going to take my phone out of my pocket.
Yeah, classic, right? Because but that was something years ago.
That 1 hour can make the difference.
Have you guys ever had the Phantom?
Oh yes, I've had Phantom for 10 years.
Like you don't even have your phone on you and you feel like
Phantom vibration for over 10 years. Yeah. Ever since I've had a phone, like I swear.
That's weird.
That's psychology, isn't it? Yeah. Right? That's like, I mean, anticipating something. Or
you guys are getting phone calls? You guys are popular?
Or it's the wanting to be popular. I think it's like even wanting that it vibrates. Right. Like, I think that's a level of what it is, right? But So I do want to move into muscle building a little bit, but to close up one of the things there, close the loop a little bit on metabolism. And I think, own your metabolism. If you're going to sustain a physique in any way, you have to actually own what you're doing prior. And the biggest mistake I know I made is I didn't feed myself in the process appropriately. Right. And, being at sub 10% or whatever body fat you have, this is the one realistic notion I hope people can appreciate, is that the metabolism or just your body and putting on body fat can actually be way more forgiving than you think if you feed yourself more during the week. And it isn't very forgiving when you go way over your calories routinely. It's just like it is, like I talk about, that anabolic window is very narrow. The anabolic window of your maintenance calories are, let's say someone's maintenance calories are 2,000, you go to 2,400, that's fine. You go to 4,000, and you do that weeks at a time. And this is the one part about the sustainability of being sub 10% body fat, is that I've had to take this notion, and I hope more people take this notion. It's really fucking hard, that it is really not going to allow you the same level of leniency that like a more freedom lifestyle and being maybe 10 to 15% body fat. You're not in bad shape. You're actually very healthy. It's just like, if you aesthetically care that much.
Also too, sorry, what's your reference point on how are you measuring your body fat? Like if you go get a DEXA scan done, then being under 10 all the time that's tough. Okay. If you're getting, you know what I mean?
Skinfold. No, and I'm glad we read this note. People need to appreciate, because I was referencing 10% DEXA, because that's what I actually feel is more real.
So before, when I was telling you that we have plenty of people under 10% all the time, that's skinfold. That's not DEXA. Yeah.
Which you got to put another 3 to 4% on average.
So so that's a skinfold. That's a skinfold test. A lot of those people too are a 3-site skinfold.
Right. So the athletes are very quick.
Yeah. Chest, ab, thigh, just for the sake of being faster. Even if you're looking at the 7-site, for a lot of the people that I work with too, if the goals that we're chasing or their goals that they're chasing are aesthetically based, where they want to see how they match up like over time, then we also freeze their age. So we're doing, let's say we're doing,
interesting.
I do the measurements for Richie Rich here. If we're looking, right, because so we use the Jackson Pollock 7-site method.
Same, yeah.
Now in there, when you go to factor those numbers into the equation, you're going to put the age in. So if you took someone and put the exact same measurements for all 7 sites and put if they were 20 or they were 40, the person that's 40 is going to come out much higher, because the equation factors in their age in there. It's going to make the assumption based on the age of being 40 that you're going to have a estimated higher level of internal fat, because unlike a DEXA that could actually pick that up, this is just an estimation off we're not being able to accurately measure those when we pinch, right, in the skin fold. So, but what I noticed over time was that there were some clients that we had over time. One guy, I won't mention his name because I don't know if he wants the name mentioned, but he was coming up to 40 and he really wanted to get under 10%. And so I'd done his skin folds over the years. I've known him for a really long time.
Sounds like me.
But anyway, so we all of a sudden, at the last time that he was under 10%, like back in his late 20s, or he might have been 30 or whatever. So now he's over 40, wants to get back 10%. We had all his stuff measured on paper. His measurements were actually lower than they were, but he was still at 11% because he was 12 years older, right? So enough times of that, and then I was like, this really crushing these people's spirits here or whatever. Actually their skin fold measurements are actually technically lower. They got less of a pinch on their ab and on their chest and on their tricep and all this stuff. So if you were to physically see his 40-year-old self and his 30-year-old self beside each other with no shirt on, his 40-year-old self, you'd be like, that dude's leaner. But then you look on the paper and you're like, oh no, he's 1.5% higher just because of his age. Right. So we started, for people that had an aesthetic goal. So aesthetic goal, Rich,
being one of them. So when we take his body fat measurements, we just froze his age at 32 when we started him. So then we have like the comparison's more uniform, right? We don't have to factor in for the age. So
that's a really good idea.
When his measurements are lower, they're lower, and he's going to come out lower.
You just compare for the first time you ever did his DEXA or his skin folds. You just like the first number you had, first age you had, and then you just
exactly. So whenever we started, here's the age you had. So now you have a more direct comparison of just aesthetic.
Every other measurements.
Yeah. At any time, it's also too, if you want to get an estimated one, that's going to have a general estimation for you increasing internal body fat as you age or whatever, then you can just change the age and write it on the side. But for comparison's sake, when we're tracking progress, we just keep his age the same all the time, right?
Yeah. And so I really like that method. I'm going to play around with some numbers with clients on that and myself, because that does make a huge factor if it's just doing that shift. And right. I hadn't even thought of that within that, the concept but I was considering around the concept of a DEXA scan, because that is different, because it is more accurate and it's harder under 10%.
For sure, yeah.
And that is, to me, like, unless you are very active,
greater measure of
overall health, like
too,
overall health, like, because you're looking at visceral fat, internal fat, everything, and it's just like you're gonna know way more about what is actually there. It is a pretty big leap from it's better than any other measure that you can do conveniently for skin folds, for sure.
The skin folds can be, I don't know, this would be like an extreme example, but you could have someone that like suffers from alcoholism and have a crazy low skin fold measurement, but they do a DEXA and they have like a super fatty liver that's like actually affecting the quality of their overall health and life, that could be detrimental to like
living,
their mortality. You know what I mean? And a skin fold's not going to pick that up in any way.
Right. So, and skin folds are actually kind of useless on people at a certain body fat percentage. Not useless, but higher they are, the more useless they are, because like you literally have a choice, like, do I do all of this? Yeah. Like, do I do an inch? Do I do like, because they're just, people are that much overweight. Like I would say most females above 30 or 35% body fat, most males above 20 or 25% body fat, that becomes a very inaccurate measurement. You can use it, and I actually team it up with another very inaccurate measurement, but it gives it a little bit of a balance.
Birth measurements?
Yeah, so I use what is like the military body fat percentage for males. It's waist, neck, and height ratio. You don't even use their age. I think you just use a waist, neck, and height. And for females, it's waist, hip, neck, and height. Now, what that does is, I think for lean people, it's not very accurate, but for overweight people, it actually completely anchors the measurement, because when you do skin folds on overweight people, you will not get enough of a body fat percentage from them.
So it's very difficult.
So I mean, like, just to go back, like 10% body fat, or for females, I think roughly you're assuming 8% more, below 18% body fat, like. And I'm just saying, like, I think this is a helpful thing for me to talk about, because it's not that I can't, it's just like, if I ever want to do that, I have to sacrifice so much freedom on like weekends and social occasions. It's doable, but then there's like, you're not going to have many 4,000 calorie days, which isn't even me binging. That is life sometimes. That is you having a dinner or a breakfast and a lunch with family. That is you during Christmas. That is just life sometimes. And to even go back to the idea of what I was mentioning before, being at 12 to 15% body fat is super healthy. like we have this perception of health being really lean.
It's a random question for you.
Yeah.
It's going to seem very superficial.
I love those.
Angeli, your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Where does she prefer you at?
Oh, that's actually really interesting. I like that question a lot. So she does not really have a preference. No. This is interesting. No, this is actually really interesting. I think I should get
her on the phone.
Unfortunately, that's your microphone. So I'll have to ask where she prefers me at, but she would not give me a straight answer, by the way. There's no way she's going to give me an honest answer. I will say that she's, and I've seen her exes, and she's even said she likes bigger guys, like strong bigger guys with muscle. She doesn't want to be bigger than her partner. And I was actually a little bit softer. I was probably closer to 16, 17% body fat. I'll say DEXA when I met her. And she doesn't really, she's, you know, even exes before, they like really compliment my physique. Wow, you look so good. She didn't like change the way she treated me. Like, it wasn't a big deal to her. She says, sense of humor, it's corny. Sense of humor matters more. But I've seen her exes. And I'm like, actually impressed that they were dating her. I'm like, you were too hot for that guy. Like, you were definitely too hot for that guy. And it's like, I think you're too hot for me. So it's like,
Kicking their coverage.
but I'm glad you even raised that point, because that is actually a really big thing that I'm appreciating is like, I don't think that, I think there's just this in between that we're unaware of. You know, that doesn't get it, just like anything on social media and discussion and culture. It's like, it's almost like a boring answer. It's like, you don't have to be in the best shape to be in great shape. Right. Because the healthiest shape is actually super mentally healthy. Right. And that's something for me that I'm really trying to understand with myself, because right now it's like, I feel like I still, most of the body dysmorphia didn't happen during the prep, didn't even happen the month after the prep. It was 2 months after the prep. It was 3 months after the prep. In the 4th month, it was like watching it slip away and going in the mirror, social media, all that stuff. And you're just like, you just start to analyze yourself and you're just like, dude, it's like, it's healthy, you know? And I think people have a hard time knowing what healthy is. Right. Because it's just such a spectrum of lifestyles. Realistically. And we will end the episode right there for the very first part 1 of Whiskey and Barbells in person, because that really does close the loop on what we were discussing around the reverse diet into maintaining that physique. And there's a lot to learn there. I think what you can hopefully take from it, as AJ mentioned, was about that habits and structure. And the longer that you're doing this, the more that it feels like your lifestyle and your routine, the more forgiveness that it has. If you talk to someone about, you know, their routine and their training, they actually just feel like that's what they do. If you ask me or you ask AJ, he has a routine and structure. And if you ask someone who's just been doing it for 10 weeks, as AJ said, well, then they go back to their old system because they're more familiar with that. And that's why they have bigger yo-yos and they have a harder sustainability. The biggest thing that I think I make an impact as a trainer for people's life is structure. I show you how to structure your training so it is actually just not wasting your time and you're making sure that you're hitting the right things, the right intensity, and then helping you structure your days too. I keep people accountable to that. When can you go for walks? When can we fit in our training? And the structure of the diet, that is the biggest impact, is people just don't know what foods to put together, when to have them, what's efficient for them. Now, once you have that structure, that's the lifestyle structure you want to work off of. And as AJ said, the longer you do that, the more it feels like your norm. What you really want is a structure that helps you lose body fat. And then that structure, eventually you just have more calories in it. That's kind of the difference between being in a fat loss phase, being in a maintenance phase, and being in a muscle building phase. They're all really a lot of the same. It's just how many calories you're having, right? You have high protein in all of those, and then you just might have more calories in the ratio of protein versus carbs or fats will be higher when you're in either a maintenance or a muscle building phase. So it's about the structure and the habits. And what AJ, I really want to highlight that he said that was super valuable is that, you know, there's flexibility and there's forgiveness within your structure, because you don't just go off the rails and you don't just go start eating out all the time. If you're used to the structure and you're very comfortable with it. So I think that's a very hopeful and important lesson that you learn from it. And what I kind of highlighted is it requires a lot of activity if you want to sustain it, or it requires a good amount of control around your calorie intake if you want to sustain it, because there's just not a lot of room for error. When you have those weekends that can have 4,000 calories, which does happen to people, that's going to be that much harder to sustain that physique. I hope you learned a lot within this episode. So if you know anyone that needs this kind of feedback on reverse dieting and sustaining low body fat percentage, please do share it with them, because that's how this podcast gets out. And make sure to tune into the next episode, because after you go into a maintenance phase, you're doing your reverse diet, you're in maintenance phase, the next thing you should be doing is a muscle building phase. So that's why I wanted part 2 to be about muscle building. And you'd be surprised that muscle building and hypertrophy, so hypertrophy means muscle building, is really kind of changing within the literature. We're finding out really new strategies and ideas and changing our perspectives about what it is to do effective muscle building. So we have a really good discussion on that. I talk about my own experience with a really cool rest pause technique. AJ kind of gives good depictions on understanding what effective reps are. And you get to hear Rich's perspective on what was his biggest driver for when he wanted to build muscle, as he has a hard time building muscle, but he's had some major habits that he's changed and made significant difference for him. So tune in into the next episode for that. But in the meantime, my friend, don't forget, it is not about the pursuit of happiness. It is about the happiness within that pursuit. And I will catch you next time.